Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Audit Committee. Just to go through one or two things. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government, this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance. Do we have any apologies?
We've got apologies from Councillor Patrick, and Councillor Brown is hoping to join us later. But she's submitted anticipatory apologies just in case she doesn't make it.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Next item is the minutes. Firstly, have we all read them? And secondly, do we wish to raise anything? Happy to agree them?
Agreed.
That leaves the rolling action log. Again, is there anything anyone wish to raise? No? Okay. Then we go on to item 5, which I believe is yourself, Isabel, and the Corporate Fraud Annual Update Report.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of the report is to provide an annual update on the work of the Corporate Fraud team, including an updated Corporate Fraud Action Plan. Paragraph 4.2 explains the last report submitted to this committee was February of this year, and it provided an update on performance and a summary of work undertaken over the period of the 1st of April to the 31st of December 2024. Appendix 1 in Section 5 provides committee with the Corporate Fraud team activity for the year. I'd also like to ask committee to note that the Corporate Fraud team have met or exceeded target in one of the 3 performance indicators. The Corporate Fraud team have been unable to deliver 3 fraud prevention events in one quarter, however, have exceeded the target over the year. The other KPI not met relates to the draft report issue within 3 weeks of completion of fieldwork. Details of both can be found at paragraphs 5.2 to paragraph 5.5. Paragraphs 5.6 and 5.7, as well as Appendix 2, set out improvements in progress with the Corporate Fraud Action Plan. Progress will continue to be reported twice yearly as part of these updates. I'd finally draw your attention to the recommendations at paragraph 2.1 and the conclusions at section 8, which are to consider fraud-related performance and the summary of work undertaken within the Corporate Fraud team during 24-25. To note that the Corporate Fraud team met or exceeded 1 out of the 3 of its performance indicators, and note progress with the Corporate Fraud Action Plan, which has been updated for 25-26, with a further update later in 2025. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Isabel. I was just going to ask a wee bit more about the performance indicators, because I also noticed that you said you'll keep them under review to give it whether the KPIs best reflect performance. Gosh, if that wasn't easy for some reason. So I just wanted to explore that a wee bit more. And I noted that within the table that the issue of the draft reports, it was 83%. And I appreciate that that probably just relates to one report, but it does seem to be a bit a significant difference, 83% for one report. And the other question in relation to the KPIs I wanted to ask is around only delivering in Q2 only one event, but there has been a significant increase. What is the intention going forward around maintaining that level of engagement around the fraud?
Go ahead, Isabel.
Thank you. So yeah, the KPIs, you know yourself, KPIs will tell a certain story, but they don't give you the full story. They give you the details that relate to them, and then hopefully what I've tried to do there has come across in terms of the bigger, wider picture with regards to both of those ones that we didn't meet. So if I go to the third one, the events, we try to obviously do 3 in every quarter. The issue this year has mainly been around timing. As you picked up there, it was 1 event in Q2 and then 7 in Q3. And it is just literally that. It's the timing of being able to slot them in. And it's not just within the corporate fraud team capacity to do it. It's about additional requests coming in and different services who are now asking us to come and do sessions with their teams to highlight the more around the proactiveness of the prevention of fraud. So when we're asked to do that, we're obviously trying to slot them into the times that suit those teams. So that's where I've got to with that last comment that you also picked up there, Councillor Meikle-John, about keeping them under review. It's about making sure that the KPIs are presenting the accurate overall wider picture. We are trying to keep on track of the events. One of the issues we have found specifically last year around it was trying to get them undertaken over the summer months, because a lot of people are on holiday and they get moved around. So sometimes it just isn't feasible. So if you looked at it for the annual picture, we achieved that. We more than achieved that, and actually more than doubled what the number of events that we actually did last year. So it's not a weakening position, if you like. It's actually quite positive. It's just that we have to try and manage that better. On the other hand, we don't just want to be slotting them in to suit a performance indicator. We want to make sure that we're adding value to those teams that are requesting those events. So it is a bit of a juggling act. With regards to the second one, yeah, we just missed that one, unfortunately. And it was, I think I detailed it below, it was around just some additional work that we were doing with Police Scotland that we needed to put into that report. So we were waiting for information back in order to do that. So again, it was a little out with our control, but it's not something, there's not an issue within any of these that is something that's a bit of a problem for us. It's just trying to manage what we've got, but equally keeping those performance indicators to the front of our mind in terms of, are they working, are these the best performance indicators for us? Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thank you, Convener.
Councillor Hannah.
I have no further questions.
Councillor Forrest.
Thanks. Can I ask, Isabel, page 21, the number of new whistleblowing cases has increased in 24-25. I'm happy to see that out of that big increase, there's also a big resolution to it as well. But could you tell us a little bit more about it, please?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because the corporate fraud team is very much demand led. We never know what's going to come in or when it's going to come in. So we're very much unaware of what's coming into the mailbox. So it's been able to respond and react to that as quickly as possible. We try to assess cases within 5 days, and that is an initial look at them to see what allegations maybe have come in, to then try and say, right, well, what more do we need from people? Are the whistleblowers remaining anonymous? Are we going to be able to get any more information? If we don't think we are, what can we work with in the information they've given us? So we try to do that initial look at them within 5 days, and that's one of the KPIs. That's the KPI we did meet, actually. So that can be really changeable, and I think when I came to committee in February, and it's also in this one again around the Fraud Awareness Week and how that generated some work. So in some ways, I think from a corporate fraud team manager point of view, I would say that although there is an increase in allegations, it's actually a positive thing in the sense that people are more and more feeling more comfortable at being able to contact the corporate fraud team, and if they do have a concern, that they feel that they have somewhere to go with that. If they don't feel they can go to their line managers, or in fact they just don't know how to deal with it, the corporate fraud team seem to be people are more aware of them now, and that's an avenue for them to go. So within the corporate fraud team, we're taking it as a positive in terms of the numbers, and we're very much managing the workload around those allegations and those whistleblowing claims to make sure that we are working through them all at the various points. It's never a quiet time in the corporate fraud team, but certainly sometimes can be busier than others in terms of the reactive work that we're doing.
Thank you for that. It is good to know that people can feel comfortable reporting something, and they know that it's going to get done. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. I've just got one question, given of the convener, and you know how it preys on my mind. The report notes that staff resource in corporate team will be reducing in the second half. What impact is this liable to have on your team, given, as you know my concern for your team's mental well-being?
Yes, thank you, convener. Yes, we've got someone who is taking flexible retirement in the second half of the year, and that will just basically come down to me to manage. Part of the answer to the previous question is around the fact that we are demand led. We don't know what's going to come in and when it's going to come in, so it will be a juggling act. We have worked before with a part-time member of staff, and we didn't suffer any detrimental effect from that. It is just the managing of the work, and then if things are going to take longer, it's about communicating that to whistleblowers, for example, to services, and yourselves as that progresses. And that's where things like the performance indicators come in. Back to that very first question, it's about trying to manage everything around all the moving parts, but it's difficult to say in advance what that's going to look like. It's just keeping an eye on it and managing it to the best that we can.
Thanks, Isabel. It is reassuring that more people are coming forward, but we do need to be careful. It's a double-edged sword. It then doesn't. Thank you. Is there any more questions? No. Do we agree the item?
Happy to agree.
Agreed.
Then we'll move on to item 6, risk management assurance, and I believe it's yourself, Amanda.
Yes, thank you, convener. The report presented today is the annual risk management assurance report covering the period 1st of April 2024 to 31st of March 2025, and this is the second of these reports that the committee has received, and this report reflects the revised reporting arrangement. A large amount of work is required to pull this report together, and that's been carried out by the Corporate Risk Coordinator, Hugh Coyle, and supported by Isabel. And that work has been reviewed and then considered by the corporate management team for presentation to the Audit Committee. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank both Hugh and Isabel for their hard work and support in producing this report. The annual report itself is presented as Appendix 1 of the paper, and that starts on page 32 of the agenda. And this report is also published online within the corporate risk management pages of the Council website. Paragraph 4.3 of the report includes a link to the Corporate Risk Register, which was last updated in May of this year. However, this is really for information only, as the role of the Audit Committee should be focused on the effectiveness of the risk management framework. In January 2023, Executive approved an improvement plan as part of the risk management assurance policy, and this report sets out progress against that plan. However, it should be recognised that good risk management is an evolving, iterative process, and I think the action plan reflects that. But overall, CMT have provided substantial assurance on the effectiveness of the risk management arrangements. We've drawn on a few sources to assess the effectiveness, and that includes corporate risk register updates, the corporate risk management update report to executive in March of this year, and the work done on the annual governance statement. There are 6 actions in the improvement plan, 3 of which relate to corporate risk assurance and 3 which relate to service risk assurance. And for each of these, progress to date and the priorities for 25-26 have been included in the report on pages 35 to page 40. In terms of corporate risk assurance, the main actions include regular review of the corporate risk register, support for elected members in scrutinising risk, and the process in place to annually assess the effectiveness of the existing governance groups. And a key improvement for 25-26 is improving the links between risks and performance information, which sits within the council plan and director plans, and also improvements to the risk sections within the committee reports. In terms of service risk priorities, a summary of the progress with services is shown on page 39, and further information is provided on page 40 relating to risk training and specialist risks. So in summary, whilst the report provides substantial assurance, we do recognise that the risk management landscape in such a complex organisation is challenging. We need to continually review our approach and to ensure it's appropriate, flexible and robust enough for the organisation. Officers from across the council services have been working to improve their risk management processes, and their support is very much appreciated. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you. A couple of questions. The first one is to pick up on what Amanda was talking about there. It's the action plan and relating risk to performance plans. I would like at some point for that to come back to audit convener so that we could be able to see clearly the link around that. But I was also going to ask, because it's been picked up that elected member training is really important, and at the time of the report being written, there was only one elected member having gone through that. And I was going to 2 questions. One of them was, what are we doing about having risk highlighted throughout the organisation? Because risk is everybody's responsibility. It just depends on what level you're at to what your responsibilities actually are. And that relates to elected members as well. And from the point of view of the elected members, could consideration be given perhaps in the next term to making risk training mandatory before people could then take up positions on key committees such as audit and executive? And because I think that there has to be a greater understanding around what risk actually means. It's not just stepping out in front of a bus, it's around the financial risks, the reputational risks, around how we take decisions and how the council operates. And I just wonder if consideration could be given to that, making it a bit clear, but also trying to have that inherent throughout the organisation, that everybody has a responsibility.
Thank you. I'll certainly discuss with Brian the option to make the members training mandatory. I think the last update I got was that 4 people had undertaken the training. That may have moved on. I know Brian had sent out a sort of reminder and links and things like that to members. We also had talked about the introduction of a briefing session on risk prior to the corporate risk register going to executive on a 6-monthly basis. We did have one session, and then we didn't have the second session, but that was kind of because it was just before the budget. We'd had lots of briefing sessions and we'd been going through a lot of particularly the financial risks already at that point. So I think the rationale behind having that session in advance of executive still stands. I think it's still a good one. We do just need that commitment from everyone for that session, but certainly I'll pick up with Brian about the training. I do feel that as an organisation, our approach to risk is constantly improving. And I think we are having better discussions on risk, and we're incorporating it into, for example, that annual review of all our governance groups. I think that's becoming a much more effective process where we're really looking at what that governance group is trying to achieve, what are the priorities and the performance that sits in the council plan, and how effective is that group at helping to manage the risks associated with that. So I think that process is improving, and that's because there's a lot of working groups across the council that's drawing more and more officers into that process. And also where we're talking about some of those specialist risk registers. So for example, for the Strategic Asset Modernisation Board, each class of assets has a risk register that is reviewed with officers who review the corporate risk coordinator spends time and sort of with each sort of at the lead for each asset category, but also does workshops with services to help develop their approach. So I think, and we also have corporate risk training on OLI for officers. So I do think that our approach is improving all the time. I feel a lot more confident now than I did sort of 3 years ago in terms of where we are with risk with officers, and the fact that it does feel that it's more embedded in our processes. But certainly I can look at bringing something back to audit committee in terms of making those links between our plans, our performance and our risk, how we present that.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, convener. And just want to say that it will not surprise anybody, since I'm forever talking about the importance of training and briefings, that I've done the training and I was at the briefing, and I found both very valuable in terms of my understanding and ability to understand the reports. The only thing I would say is I think the point that Councillor Meikle-John's making is really important. Councillors should be having that before their first report on risk, rather than partway down the road. So I think it's really important that you look at the ways in which councillors are trained and briefed on this. I just reiterate that.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Anyone else? No? I would just like to reiterate as well how important it is, especially on a committee like this. I'm actually fully risk trained with the job I did in the railway. However, I'm going to go through it. So if I can do it, everybody else should be able to. And I'd encourage us to do so. Is there any more questions, or can we agree that item?
Agreed.
Happy to agree.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to item 7, internal audit annual assurance, which I believe is with yourself again, Isabel.
Thank you, convener. Apologies in advance. This is quite a biggie. So this report is the 24-25 internal audit annual assurance report. The purpose is to summarise the work internal audit have undertaken over the course of the last year, and to provide an overall opinion on the council's arrangements for risk management, governance and control based on that work. The report also comments on our compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. As you can see from section 2, the committee is asked to note that sufficient internal audit work was undertaken to support a balanced assurance, and the internal audit can provide substantial assurance on the council's arrangements for risk management, governance and control for the year to 31st of March 25. In addition, I can report that internal audit met or exceeded 2 of its key performance indicators and operated with no real or apparent impairment or restrictions to scope, independence and objectivity of the internal audit activity during the year. Section 5 of the report provides a summary of the internal audit workload in 24-25. This includes paragraphs 5.1 and 5.2, which relate to our role in the National Fraud Initiative, and paragraphs 5.3 and 5.4, which provide an update on the quarterly work that we undertake on duplicate payments. I also highlight in section 5 the overall adequacy of the internal audit work undertaken during 24-25, as well as outcomes relating to 3 reviews from 23-24, which are included as part of this annual assurance report. Paragraph 5.8 provides details of these 3 audits from 23-24. Paragraph 5.6 highlights the plan set out 20 assignment areas to be completed during the year. Of these 20 assignment areas, 11 Falkirk Council audit reports were required. The 11 audit reports do not include those reports issued to the Falkirk Integration Joint Board, Strathcarron Hospice or Falkirk Pension Fund. Paragraph 5.7 sets out a summary of the status of the 11 audit reports, with 2 reviews not started, which have been deferred into the 25-26 internal audit plan and were agreed at the last committee. Paragraph 5.7 also confirms the assurance outcomes related to all these finalised reports, with a summary of the work completed at Appendix 2. The scope of and the findings arising from each finalised assignment since last year's annual assurance report is set out at Appendix 3. Particular reference should be made to the last 3 assignment summaries in Appendix 3, as these findings have not been reported to committee before. These reviews include the Strategic Asset Modernisation Board, the Housing Asset and Investment Team Contract Management, and Kinship Carers Payment Arrangements reports. These 3 summaries each have an additional section at the end of the table explaining the number and the grading of the recommendations. The section in the table also includes the range of agreed implementation dates. Hopefully you'll find going forward that this additional section is of a help to you. Paragraphs 5.9 and 5.10 highlight to committee the number and type of assurance opinions provided in internal audit reviews completed to date in 24-25, with analysis of comparator data from previous years available. This year I've also been able to provide another table at paragraph 5.12, which provides a summary of the number of recommendations made within each of our grade 1 to grade 3 classifications. Paragraphs 5.3 and 5.14 draw attention to the increase in grade 1 recommendations. At paragraph 5.15 you can see that internal audit performance against the 3 performance indicators. Actual performance exceeded target for 2 out of the 3. However, in the third, the percentage of completion of draft reports within 3 weeks had dropped below target. Reasons for the slight drop are at paragraph 5.16. Our overall opinion of substantial assurance can be found at paragraph 5.17. Section 6 of the report comments on our compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. These set out the principles and practices that we must comply with. And every year we're required to undertake a self-assessment against the standards. This self-assessment was undertaken by internal audit during March 23. There's also a 5-yearly external assessment in place, which has come after that self-assessment, and we were last externally assessed in 2018 and we were found to be compliant. The current external assessment is underway by Fife Council, and that is undertaken on behalf of the Scottish Local Authorities Chief Internal Auditors Group. In conclusion, and drawing your attention to recommendations at paragraph 2.1 and the conclusions at section 8, internal audit undertook sufficient work during 24-25 to support a balanced and evidence-based opinion that substantial assurance could be placed on the Council's arrangements for risk management, governance and control. In providing this opinion, internal audit operated with no impairments or restrictions to independence. At this point, I would like to thank the full team, the internal audit team, the corporate fraud team and the corporate risk coordinator. The 3 teams work really closely together, and at this time of year, with the amount of work that we are trying to get over the line to get into all of these reports is a significant ask. The number of audit committees we have over all our different clients it's multiplied is the point I'm trying to make, I suppose, and I would just like to thank them all for their efforts in helping me get everything to this point and over the line. Thank you. Happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for your work's hard team efforts. I'm just going to quickly ask, regarding the drop in draft reports, I'm going to relate it back to what I've already highlighted in the previous report we've just gone on, and that's, is there any update on the joint working agreement with Clackmannanshire Council and getting you extra resource? Because again, I can't stress this enough. I don't want your staff having stress burnout.
The conversations with regards to resourcing are ongoing. They have moved on a bit. We're at the stage of looking at Clackmannanshire Council's job profiles and trying to look at bringing in a new senior internal auditor. Amanda and myself, we actually have a meeting in the next couple of days to hopefully drive that forward again. We are obviously working with them still this year with the plan that we have agreed with them for the workload, and it's obviously going to take a bit of time to try and get an additional resource in at Clackmannanshire Council, but it is in hand, and they are on board with trying to achieve that.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you. I would also just want to add thanks to yourself and the team for the work that's been done, particularly this year, recognising there's been a number of additional pieces of work requested through Council to audit, and some of those have been challenging, let's say, in their nature, but the team have worked well to actually achieve where they are. However, I do have a question in relating to the page 46 and the reviews that have been undertaken. And I don't know whether this is really for Isabel or whether it may well be for the Chief Executive and CMT, is the number of levels where we've had a level of assurance of limited or less is 64%. We should be continuing to strive to get to that substantial assurance. So I just wondered if there was a particular reason that we're seeing that decline, and basically, you know, what is there something that we're doing to try and address this, so that we can get up to that more substantial assurance with more of our reviews going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. Isabel.
It's a hard one to try and answer because I couldn't put my finger on one thing that's a reason for diminishing assurance levels in reports. I think more and more, and this is just my own opinion, more and more people are under significant pressure in their day-to-day jobs, and that it's keeping everything spinning, I suppose. So the thing for me, from an internal audit point of view, is yes, the assurance opinions are significant, but equally so is the reaction and action taken with regards to the recommendations that have to be implemented. So if we are making a range of recommendations, and you know, from all of these papers, you see the amount of work that's being achieved and the number of recommendations that are being made. It's about making sure that they're agreed and they're taken seriously and they're implemented and hopefully within the timeframes that have been agreed, because that says a lot more in the sense that this is maybe where the starting point was with an audit, but this is how we're going to improve that area and get it to the place that it needs to be. And part of doing that is around reducing the risks that we've maybe found, or where controls need to be tightened up again. So, and as a council, we are quite good at working on the outstanding recommendations. As you know, I bring outstanding recommendations updates to you twice a year. And the number of recommendations that remain outstanding aren't particularly high, and that is down to the efforts of services to make sure that those recommendations are actioned. So yes, it's not a position we want to be in with regards to the assurance opinions, but it is more around making sure that the work is being done at the other end to improve that situation.
I don't know whether the Chief Executive may want to say something.
I was just going to ask that myself. Would you like to say anything, Kenneth?
Yes, thank you, Convener. I think that the point Isabel makes about how we respond to audit is really important. My view from where I'm sitting is that we have had a lot of audits recently have looked at really challenging areas for us. And for me, the measure of the council is how we respond to that. And it feels to me that over the last number of years, we've got a much improved approach in terms of the way that we are addressing what is coming forward from these audit recommendations. And if we continue to do that, and I'm confident we will, then I think we'll see that trajectory change in terms of we will have more reviews coming up with substantial assurance. So, I mean, this is, I think it's a really interesting question, and I have been very aware of that trend. It doesn't greatly concern me at the moment, partly because my knowledge of the kind of areas that audit are going into, and as I say, the way that's been responded to. But I would become concerned if this continued over a longer period. So, as I say, I think for me the basic issue is that the culture, the approach, the joint working, the determination to learn from what's happening in audit seems to me, and I think there's strong evidence for this, to have really improved within the council, and that is what ultimately will lead us to having more audit reports with substantial assurance.
Could I then ask Kenneth that you undertake to keep an eye on that so that we do make sure that there is progress as we go forward, so that we don't continue to slip back?
Well, what I would say in relation to that, Convener, is that something we do as CMT. So a number of years ago, I'd say that the visibility in relation to what was coming forward to Audit Committee was less clear. We now have all the reports coming through the corporate management team. We regularly discuss that performance and what the learning has to be. So as I say, I think that will get us to a better position, but we are keeping a very close eye on it, certainly.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you. Page 48, right at the bottom, 6.7. The external validation by Fife Council has been delayed, making it longer than 5 years since the last review. Why is that, and what impact will it have for us?
I think probably the first thing I'd like to say is the external validation, the 5-year assessment, is a huge piece of work, an additional piece of work to the day-to-day running of audit teams. It was agreed by the Scottish Local Authority Internal Auditors Group that it would be a partnership between whoever wanted to be involved, and it was to save the huge costs that are related to doing this work, because it is so big. It's something like 260 odd questions that have to be asked and evidenced, and so it's not in any way, shape or form a small piece of work, sorry. And that is the main reason that it's taken so long, because the people who are doing it on top of their day jobs, and they're trying to fit various pieces of work in, and just the scale itself. So it can tend to be picked up and then put aside depending on what time of the year. For example, just now isn't a great time of year because everyone's doing their annual assurance work. So I'm also doing an external assessment currently for Dundee City Council, and again that has been delayed and has taken a lot longer than I wanted to. Just the sheer scale of it, and trying to get involved and speak to all the different management teams within Dundee City Council, then waiting for information back, then actually dealing with that information. So it is huge. We currently do have a draft report from Fife Council, and it is just more or less now me getting to a point, once all audit committee work is undertaken, to sit down with that draft report and go through it. So you asked about impact. It means that, so I'm probably at the stage where I should now be doing an annual self-assessment, because if that had come in last year, I would be actioning those recommendations and bringing new progress with those recommendations that they've suggested. So I'm a little behind in that, because obviously, as I've said, I've got the draft report. I then, like when we are given audit reports, I then have to look at those recommendations and work out what I can do and when I can do it. So we're not that far away now, I would say, and I will obviously continue to bring you updates, and then it will be about updating you with the recommendations and what we're doing about them. So I'd say that's the greatest impact, but in terms of what we do and how we do it, it hasn't changed anything, or will change anything. It's more the bigger picture is around the change to the public internal audit standards. We're now working towards the global internal audit standards, and again, that's quite a significant piece of work to make sure that we are aligned with what's required there. And it may mean, well, I know that it's going to mean updates to our charter, inclusion of a mission statement, and just various changes that will then have a knock-on effect to other changes in how we do our work. So things like updating our audit manual and things like that. So it's quite involved, and it's quite time consuming and lengthy. So but we're well aware of it. We will make the time to do it, and I'll bring back progress updates so that you're kept informed of where we're at with all of that. Thank you.
Thank you for that as well. I did take note that you said it was underway, and it's well done. Now, it was just more the case of, did it start late? And are there other councils that we could call on to do it other than Fife, if perhaps because of it starting late, maybe they're under pressure and that is the reason why they started late?
Yeah, it's definitely started late, and the gathering of the information took a lot of time. We wouldn't get someone to do it now because basically all the work is done and we are at the draft report stage. It is just now getting the time to go back to it and start running through that draft report. So the majority of that is already undertaken. So and if we had been at an earlier stage and there was still a lot of work to do, then that might have been something for me to go back with. But all councils are in the same position and trying to do similar for another council. So there's nobody in really a better position to do it, because it is such a huge piece of work. It is quite an undertaking. I think it will come again. Obviously, I'd said that I'm doing the Dundee City Council one, so there will be requests in the next few years to then do that again. And for me, I certainly was unprepared for the scale of the work and the amount of time that it's taken to do it. And that will change. So there'll be a learning curve because of the new global internal audit standards. So part of the conversations already, which I've already been feeding through, was around making our internal audit plan a bit more transparent around all these things that happen in the background around standards and audit planning, and that all the time that's taken away from direct audit work. So some of that I've already taken on board, and that came through in the internal audit plan, because there was additional sections in there to cover those particular items to make it as transparent as possible. So yeah, it is a difficult one, but it is just down to sheer volume and trying to get, because if you get your team involved, you're taking them away from your own audit work as well. So it is getting a balance. But yes, this has taken longer than I think any of us anticipated within Falkirk Council or indeed Fife Council. but we're getting there now.
Thank you. I do appreciate all the hard work that you and your team have put in. Would it help starting earlier? And could we do that? Sorry, just adding to it, isn't it?
I think because of the scale of it and the resource commitment, the 5 years mark is about right. But because we're involved in the group's peer review process, Falkirk Council will be slotted in, to do someone else's review at any point in the next 5 years, or for someone who's due it. Because once we have this one done, we won't be due it again for another 5 years. So even if that came forward a year, it's got to, because it's to be done within 5 years. Even at the 4-year mark, it's reliant on who's available, what council is available at that time to do it. So it's all slotted in by someone within the wider group to who can do them and who will receive them. Because obviously, if you're receiving an assessment and you're also undertaking an assessment, it's even more. It's an even bigger commitment because you're doing it on both sides. Also, if for likes of me with the responsibilities of the Klipmanager Council Internal Audit Service, I then have the same again on that side. So it is all in the planning and the slotting in, and being very much aware of that commitment, and potentially it's about me maybe putting through more time in the internal audit plans going forward in future years when I know that these are coming up, and actually just slotting time out for some of the team to undertake that to help get that done quicker. So yeah, it's a huge thing to be involved in, but it's very important because it is that external validation to what we do. And it's a strange one being the auditee rather than the auditor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Convener.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. I just want to say first, thank you very much to you and all your officers, because there's a huge amount of work has gone on here. And we really do appreciate that we as councillors have given you quite a number of extra tasks in the past year, over and above what would have been your normal work. So very well done to you and all the other officers who have undertaken this. I recognise that also that you identify where the issue is and then make your recommendations, and it then goes back to the service to implement those recommendations. And that's not your responsibility, that's theirs. So I wanted to talk about, first of all, on page 44, the issue of duplicate payments. There's obviously been some good work done in terms of identifying where they've happened, in terms of recovering the monies that have been paid out. But I wonder if you could say a bit more about the recommendations in terms of making sure it doesn't happen again.
Go ahead, Isabel.
Yeah, sorry. I think the thing to say right away is that the scale of the duplicate payments is really small. It's something like 0.04% of all of the payments that are made. It is an important piece of our work though, because we do it quarterly, and because we do it quarterly, it keeps quite a tight control of it. So I know already that the figures that are in the report, that last paragraph, we identified the 17 potentials and duplicates with the 62.2 thousand. I know that the actions that have been taken on that, and if I find it in the appendix, the numbers that were given there are already significantly reduced. I think we are currently sitting with only one that's still got action to be taken on it, and the action that has been agreed for that is that it will be a credit note. So basically what that means is that when another invoice comes in, it will be matched to that credit note. So we obviously won't pay for that amount because we've already got this duplicate payment sitting there. So not a lot of councils do this work to make sure that we're recouping where we can. And we've done it for quite a lot of years now, and I feel that it is beneficial. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's better to be back in the council's pockets and taxpayers' pockets than sitting as a duplicate payment. So when we get the analysis done, it's someone within our team who does that every quarter. We get the figures together, he keeps a record of all of them, and that then goes out to services, it goes out to our creditors team who take immediate action as best they can, and then it's updates thereafter to find out what's happened with them. And we do that, it's every other month really now, because we've always got maybe another committee coming or we're back to doing the quarterly work. So it is quite tightly controlled, and I think I would just want to reiterate that point, that it's not, in the grand scheme of the amount of payments that are going out, it's not that significant a number, but it's something that we feel is important to keep doing. If you wanted specific figures, I can give you the up-to-date percentage if you like. I've got it here, I just would need to go and look for it.
I think I absolutely recognise that in the great scheme of things, it's a relatively small figure, but it's the fact in the beginning of that there is a duplicate payment and what we can do about our systems to ensure that that doesn't happen, rather than rectifying it afterwards. I have every faith that the money is being recouped, the work is being done.
I can see Amanda wants to come in because we have done some work on this in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's actually going to bring Karen in.
Yeah, thank you, convener. So there is a team who deal with all the invoice processing, and they monitor this very closely. So, and there's communication between that team and individual managers if there are overpayments as well. So there is a lot of work done there in that respect to both reclaim the payments, but also to make sure that there's a lesson learned from that. But I think when we get, as Isabel said, on the quarterly basis that they do the reviews, we all get the reports through as well. Now, some of the duplicates, you can see why the error's been made, because actually the same company has maybe claimed the invoice twice, but it looks like different names in all honesty. But it's then about how we make sure that our procurement systems, and we're doing everything through our invoicing systems so that everything matches up in the correct way. So there's a lot of work done, there's a lot of lessons that are learned. We develop the system as we learn further lessons as well to try and put safeguards in there, but there should be safeguards in the system that also prevent this. That's also why we've probably got such a low level, because some of them will not necessarily be in the system because they are low level payments. But there'll be different ways that we check this, and the team are quite belligerent, I would say, with the managers that are involved in this to make sure that they do learn from anything that we have overpaid.
Thank you. That's reassuring. It's so when we were talking in the most part then about minor human error rather than anything systemic, which is what I was trying to get at. Yeah. I think Amanda wants to come in at that point, convener.
Yeah, Amanda.
Yeah, I think maybe it was just helpful to think about the system and the way our system is set up. So we have obviously our finance system, which includes the creditor system, and the two kind of key areas of control that we have are one, we're very careful when we put suppliers on, because obviously a simple way for an invoice to be input to the system twice would be if the supplier was set up twice and you would put it in twice. So we have a really tightly controlled system for putting a supplier on, and there's lots of checks done to make sure that the supplier doesn't go on twice. But then when an invoice is paid against a supplier, you can only enter that invoice number once. And so the system will flag up if that invoice has already been entered against that supplier. And that's where sometimes a little bit of human error can come in, because if you put a 1 instead of a 7, the system might not identify that that's a duplicate payment. But we also have all our checks against matching to orders, and we have our checks, the author, if an invoice has to be authorised and things like that. So, and then obviously through budgetary control, we would hope that budget managers would pick up if there was additional spend through because something had been put through twice. So there's all sorts of points in the system which would hopefully catch it, which I think goes back to what Isabel's saying about why the instances are relatively few. And then just as Karen's saying, we get quite detailed reports on where the duplicates have happened. So managers can identify if there's a training need, for example, or if there's something that we need to sort of look into in a bit more detail, just in terms of maybe how a supplier's set up or something. So I think it is quite a tightly controlled area, and the system is set up to try and minimise it all as much.
Thank you very much for that very thorough answer. If we could move on, looking at the community benefits. Again, it's more about what we're learning from the process and what we're putting into place. And community benefits are really important in terms of what is going back into the community from the significant sums that the council's spending. And in this case, we have limited assurance here that this is that on the performance of this. How are we making sure that the lessons are being learned and that community benefits is uppermost in, and it may not be yourself, Isabel, it may be one of the senior officers over here that could give the answer. I think we need to know how are we ensuring that services have the importance of community benefits at the top of their minds when they are undertaking various pieces of work.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, convener. We discussed this report a few meetings ago, and Ian Henderson came along to give a brief introduction. But what we also agreed as audit committee is that you would get a report back on a range of the work that we're doing, because we recognise that it is such an important issue for committee. So the audit was a welcomed audit, not in the sense of the assurance level, because that was not where we wanted to be, but there are a lot of lessons from that. So what has happened is there are a number of actions in that particular audit that the team are working through. But in addition to that, a working group, a cross-council working group, has also been established to look at how we can improve the way we develop community benefits, how we put them into contracts in the first place, but how we then importantly monitor that we're actually getting those community benefits back where those are agreed. So that working group has now been set up, and when we report back, we would hope to give you some updates on the work of that group in terms of taking some of that work forward.
Thank you very much. That's reassuring, and I look forward to that report. Just wanted to, sorry for hogging this, but I just wanted to move on to the housing asset and investment team, again, where there was no assurance, which obviously is a matter of significant concern. But again, I think this may well be for the service rather than for Isabel. I think the first question is the implementation dates for recommendations identified have now passed. Were they actually met in time, and what's the progress towards the 12th of September deadline for a report?
Kenny.
Convener, thanks very much. Simple answer is yes, they are all met. They are all in play at the present time, except for number 5. It is in play. The only reason I can't complete it is as per our procedures, I would need to put it to the procurement board, which doesn't sit till the 12th of September. So we have actioned all the actions that are there. So they're now all complete and in play at the present time. Again, that ties back to the no assurance to start with. And again, it is only, we've talked about some stats earlier on, but things like, say, our service going and asking audit to look at something that we wanted, reassurance as a critical friend. will come back with, very rarely will it come back with full assurance. So again, being proactive and making sure that we're all there supporting and learning from things in the past helps. And as long as we get this up to date, then that should give the committee some reassurance.
Thank you very much. I think kind of on the same sort of lines, there's a working group being set up and they were going to look at the procedures and look at the training. Has that been set up, and what will the membership of that group be and the remit of that group?
Convener, that group has been set up and has had numerous meetings. It has grown a bit. The makeup is somebody from the asset management team, from housing, we have procurement, Ian Henners, and we have 3 officers for place services doing it as well. We're aware of the issues in regards to this. One of the biggest issues in regards to this work is that we do have a contracts management system with procurement. However, it didn't align itself to works contracts. These are specific works contracts. That was one of the issues. However, that has now been adapted to accommodate work contracts, which will help going forward. And as I said, the group itself is aligned to work till the end of the financial year. Again, making sure that implementation of all these procedures will be by the 12th of September because of procurement in regards to the final bit of management in play, but not that.
Thank you for that. It's reassuring to know that the actions are being taken and taken speedily. Just my last question. It notes in the report that current practice, and this may be for the Chief Executive or someone else, I'll leave you to decide that one. The report says that current practices in housing asset and investment team that have led to this sort of situation may still be in operation in other services, such as place services. So will the working group be taking that into account, considering that, and making recommendations for other services as well?
Jenny?
Apologies if I wasn't clear, Councillor Hannah. That is why the working group is there, to make sure that we've picked up here and to also pick up if there's any other anomalies elsewhere right across the council. This is a one-hit capture all and make sure we learn from this, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. It's reassuring to know that the actions are being taken, and we'll look forward to better levels of assurance in the future.
Okay. Councillor Meikle-John, I believe you've got a final.
Yes, I do have a final question, and I'm hoping that we do have somebody from the Health and Social Care Partnership here. It's in relation to the kinship care arrangements where there was given limited assurance. There were 15 recommendations made and they were spread over June to August. I was really just wondering if we could get an update on progress and if the June recommendations have been met in the timescales, and if we can perhaps have a report back on the action plan following the August completion dates.
Convener, it's Sarah Lacey here. I'm happy to come in and...
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce committee, if I could, to Monica O'Hanlon. Monica is fairly new to Falkirk and will be quite new to yourselves, and Monica has senior remit responsibilities for the team. So Monica, can I ask you to give an update on where we are with the work that's been taken forward around the recommendations, please?
Morning. Just in terms of the recommendations, some of them are immediate actions, and just to provide assurance that that work has already been undertaken, and that was particularly around tracking and reporting systems, and they are now in place, and I can provide that assurance. In terms of some of the other actions, then we'd set a timescale of the 1st of August, because I think we realised that actually there needed to be a quick turnaround in terms of some of these actions, and in particular around an update of our kinship procedures, and they are very much on target to be completed and updated on the council website by the 1st of August.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you for that. And just looking perhaps from Isabel, that we will get a report back on all of that's been concluded and clarification on the timescales for the outcomes of the actions. Brian?
I don't think it would be Isabel. I think that the committee would be asking for is just a report back on the completed action plan for this one. And I think they hadn't mentioned it, but I think they were looking for the same on the previous one, the contracts and supplier management procedures, both of which seem to be at the point of conclusion. But I think it's just your practice now that you want the completed action plan from limited assurance and no assurance and reports to come once the final date, which has been passed, which is why, as Isabel mentioned, her reports have been modified to give you the information on the recommendations and the final implementation date.
Thank you, Brian. Just for those who may not be aware, because we weren't at the last meeting, I've requested that this be a standard action plan, which you'll see an example of further down, which Malcolm's provided, and is just exactly what we're looking for. It just helps us trace things. Okay. Is there any more questions on this item? No? Are we happy to agree the item?
Agreed.
Yeah. Since this was such a lengthy item and in depth, we'll take a 10-minute comfort break. Welcome back to this second half and hopefully a shorter one. And we'll start with item 8, best value thematic review. Go ahead, Pauline. Oh, sorry, Jenna.
Yeah, thank you. I'll hand over to Pauline in just a minute or two, but I just wanted to say a few words by way of introduction. So, best value thematic reviews are now undertaken across all councils every year. This is a part of the new best value regime. There's a different theme each year, and members will recall that in previous years we've had the theme of leadership and the theme of workforce innovation. And really what this means is that the audit of best value is in effect an ongoing process. So it forms part of the annual audit for every council each year. This year, the focus has been on transformation. I think that's a particularly important one for us as a council, given the challenges we have in terms of financial sustainability and how we go about addressing that, and albeit the significant progress I think has been made in recent years. I think it's still really important that we're looking at the opportunities to improve what we do in this area. The full thematic review report from Audit Scotland is attached as Appendix 1. As officers, we welcome the findings contained in the report. We think it gives a fair and balanced assessment of performance and progress and what still needs to be done. We accept the recommendations from the review. We think they will help support further improvement required. And you'll note that we've extracted from the report the recommendations, and the action plan is attached as Appendix 2. And perhaps with that, Convener, I'll pass over to Pauline just to say something about Audit Scotland's work on this.
Thank you, Kenneth. Pauline?
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, just to add to that, members will be aware, as the Chief Executive mentioned, that we've taken this approach to best value since the start of this appointment round 3 years ago. And as a result of the thematic reviews that we do each year, the Accounts Commission will take an overall summary of all of the thematic reviews across all of the councils that will represent auditors' finding across all 32 councils. I think I'm right in saying that the summary report for the previous thematic review, which was on workforce innovation, I think that might be going to the Accounts Commission in the next couple of weeks. And then it will be shared with members, and that will give a picture across all councils and a summary of recommendations. Similar will happen with this one, but I expect that to be into next year. I think it's fair to say that across the piece from some of the other reviews of transformation across other councils, Falkirk seems to be in a similar position with lots of councils, where recognising difficulties in identifying projects and programmes that are truly transformational, rather than just looking for simple financial efficiencies. So it's about the wider piece about transforming how service is delivered, and some of the challenges around how you shift the dial and move into a space where the projects that you deliver transform service delivery, deliver efficiencies that are recurring and in the medium to long term. And there is a significant challenge in that area, recognising that quite often resources are required to deliver those transformational projects at the same time as keeping day-to-day delivery. So we recognise the challenges. You'll see that we have 5 recommendations in the report, which again are the sorts of recommendations you would expect to see in this subject area. And we can see that management have responded with some action plans and dates for concluding. We will follow up in those recommendations, as we do with all of the thematic action plan points. And you'll see some of that coming out in our annual audit report at the conclusion of this year's audit. Obviously, these actions are quite new, so we don't expect there to be much progress when we report later on in September, but you will see an update on the previous 2 thematic reviews. I didn't want to say much more on the report other than just to draw out at Exhibit 1. We do have a good practice example in there around the process that the council has for setting criteria for projects which should be considered to be covered as part of the transformation programme, we're trying to do that as part of our overall reporting, to draw out examples of good practice to share across the sector. So just to draw that to members' attention. Didn't want to say any more on the plan, but on the report, but happy to take any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you. And it was really helpful to hear from Pauline there just about where Falkirk is in relation to other councils. I think everybody is struggling with that big transformation agenda, what it actually is, and can it be big enough and meaningful to help the organisation reach its financial sustainability, but continue to maintain services. And that is a real challenge to be able to do. What I did want to ask a wee bit about is the highlight in the report where the reporting on the Council of the Future. This has always been something that's been quite challenging, particularly for elected members to be able to have a clear oversight of that. So I just wondered if there could be some clarity about the oversight of the Council of the Future project, a wee bit about what these Council of Future projects are intended to do, and how that will then be developed in order to give a bit of assurance around our budget management and financial sustainability.
Pauline.
So I think this is probably best for management. So our report highlighted that we were content with the level of reporting and detail that went to the Council of the Future Board. I think our specific point was about how that reporting on savings is more transparent to elected members and also to local communities. So we're content with the internal reporting, but it was just that transparency in the wider horizon.
Thank you, Pauline. Dennis.
Yes, thank you, convener. And I suppose I'd refer to the action plan and the response that we provided in relation to this on the matter of elected member reporting. And I suppose I'd say by way of introduction to that, we were kind of aware of the fact that there was more to be done in that space, and our new performance and planning manager is looking at the best ways of incorporating that into our ongoing performance management and performance reporting. But I think also specifically the information on the transformation programme on Council of the Future will bring that into the annual budget report and the annually updated financial strategy. And I think we're really keen that the members do have a clear line of sight on that, because actually, and this ties back into Pauline's comments, we've done a lot of transformation in this council that's reflected in the report. We have some examples, and I particularly cite the strategic property review, where we've done a really radical change, which made significant differences, which has engaged with communities and has produced significant financial savings. But if we're going to get to that position of financial sustainability, we're going to have to look more broadly than that. And that's going to take us beyond that internal working within the council to look at broader opportunities that lie with partners and beyond. And I think that in that context, it's really important that members have got a clear line of sight on that, because this is going to be really challenging territory. And I think members will be potentially asked to make some very challenging decisions in relation to that.
Councillor Meikle-John.
I mean, obviously, Chief Exec's highlighted that it's going to go to through the financial strategy, and how will the Council of the Future programme be reported to members? Probably that's the simplest question for me to get to.
Well, I think two aspects to that. One, through performance reports that come to scrutiny on a regular basis, and secondly, as set out in the action plan, through the annual budget report and the financial strategy.
Okay. Councillor Anna.
Thank you, convener. Partly related to that, but and also to the kind of comments about the impact assessments, the EPIAs. The report highlights the issue of community engagement and it being a weakness for the council, and it is linked to the transparency question. You have to inform the community as well as engage with the community to get their views. I wonder if you could say a bit more about what work is being done to improve on this. I mean, I have seen some improvement in community engagement in the time I have been a councillor, but it still falls far short of what we would want it to be.
Thank you, convener. So the report acknowledges that in terms of specific transformation projects, there has been engagement with relevant community groups, including vulnerable groups, on service redesign. I think there are a couple of issues. One is, as we picked up in the previous question, that kind of transparency about setting out what has been done and the impact that it's had. And the second one is ensuring that it's applied consistently across all the transformation work that we're doing. We've recently, of course, approved the community engagement strategy, the PDP work that involved elected members, brought us to having that new strategy in place. I think that then provides a framework for ensuring we're taking a more consistent and robust approach to engagement across all of the Council of the Future project.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? No? And we're happy to agree this item.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 9, annual audit plan. I believe that's back to yourself again, Pauline.
Yes, it is. So this is just a short paper, and it's the plan for the Falkirk Temperance Trust. So it's similar to the annual audit plan that members would have seen, I think, back in April for the council itself. This paper wasn't available for the agenda back in April, so apologies for it coming to you so late. I'm not the appointed auditor for the Temperance Trust. It's Gillian McCready, who's the senior manager for the council audit, but she couldn't come along today, so I said I would talk to this paper. I'll just go through a couple of key things in the report. You'll see in line with the same style and layout as the council plan. Exhibit 1 will outline the materiality level that the auditor will apply when carrying out testing of the accounts. So that's set at £3,000. We also have a reporting threshold of £165. So that's the level at which the auditor will report to this committee on any misstatements or errors that she identifies during the audit. We also, at Exhibit 2, bring to your attention any significant risks of material misstatement that may apply to the financial statements. And we only have one significant risk there, and that's the standard risk that we include in all of our annual audit plans that relates to the risk of fraud caused by management's override of controls. You'll see there we have a list of audit procedures that the team will carry out during this year's audit to address that risk, and it will be reported, the findings of that will be reported in the annual audit report at the conclusion of the audit. The only other thing to highlight is at Exhibit 3, the audit timetable. You'll see there's a lot of TBCs in there for the relevant committee date. This audit typically will run alongside the council audit and the pension fund audit. It's the same team that work across those. So it will be a similar timetable, but we just haven't clarified the exact committee that will bring the final annual audit report to, as priority has to be given to the council and the pension fund audits. But I expect that to be around about September, October time that we'll bring that back to you. So I don't have anything else to say on it, but I'm happy to take any questions and I'll answer where I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, convener. I was just wondering if Cost of the audit process seems a bit disproportionate to the fund. I was just wondering, first of all, is that taken into account, or is there any way that we could look at reducing that audit fee? Because my understanding is that that fee comes to the council and not covered by the actual trust.
Amanda?
Thank you, convener. So at the moment, the trust is treated as a Section 106 body, which means it has to go through this process. And we have gone back and forward with Audit Scotland once or twice about the fee level. We are, you might recall that from last year, there was a couple of recommendations in respect of the Temperance Trust. So Brian and the governance team have been having a look at how we can change the arrangements for the trust, which would mean it would no longer be a Section 106 body, which means it would no longer be subject to this process and therefore this fee. Now, I think we are where we are for 24-25 audits, but we hope to have in place what we need to have is an external trustee to allow that change to happen. So we're hoping that we'll have that in place for 25.
Councillor Hannah?
I have no further questions about it.
Okay. Councillor Forrest?
Thanks. My question's been answered.
Thank you. Then in that case, are we happy to agree item 9?
Agreed.
And we'll go to item 10 for an update from Malcolm or Paul.
Thank you, convener. As highlighted in the report, this is an update on the previous audit that was undertaken, and obviously we've highlighted within the action plan there the key dates that were requested by committee, and we've highlighted those. There is only one recommendation that's outstanding, and that was the one in relation to the condition surveys, which is the very last item, and they're on track for completion by the 31st of March 2026, and they generally relate to minor assets.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Meikle-John?
I would just want to thank the team for the work that's been done on this. I think it's been very challenging. I think what we now need to focus on is looking forward and the lessons learned. And I don't know whether that there's the potential there for officers to make comment about the lessons learned, not just for this building, but going forward, to how we won't go back the way into the position we were, but have a much more robust management of buildings and maintenance going forward.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, convener. Whilst not explicitly highlighted in this report, it was highlighted in the previous report. One of the key lessons that has been learned by the authority, and it is across the authority, is that there has to be effective communication in the recording of actions, particularly in relation to health and safety works. And as highlighted in the report, all actions that are identified now, from risk assessments and things like that, are recorded and followed through from identification to resolution of.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, convener. It's just kind of reiterate the important thing here is the learning experience. The strategic property review has kind of highlighted again and again the problems with maintenance and of our buildings, and we need to be assured that that is not going to be a continuing problem. Just happy to have the reassurance that there are processes in place, but it needs to be regularly monitored.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Paul?
Convener, so we have a programme of condition surveys, we have a programme of maintenance assessments that are undertaken annually. We have a property compliance team, we have a new facilities and maintenance team, all as part of the establishment of the corporate approach to the management of our property asset. These provide us with the framework to provide the assurance that we identify everything we can reasonably possibly do. Will maintenance continue to be a challenge? It will always be a challenge because of the challenges we have as a big portfolio. However, do we have the framework in place to effectively manage those risks? The answer is yes.
Thank you, Paul. Malcolm?
Thank you, convener. Just to add the point that my impression is that Falkirk Council has historically underinvested in its assets and kept too many assets, so that what funding was available was spread too thin. So the challenge on my service is to make sure that the compliance activity is undertaken, and that we bring forward proposals and recommendations for funding. Elected members also need to have cognizance of that when considering their budgets, to ensure that there are enough funding available for us to fully take forward the improvements that are identified.
Thank you, Malcolm. Councillor Forrest.
Just like to reiterate that it's passed. We can start looking forward to better things. And thanks to everybody involved in doing such a big job. Not been pleasant, but that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Forrest. I'd just like to sum up by saying it was a really bad report. It gave me great cause for concern, but given the lessons learned and the work your team has done since, I think you're to be commended. And so long as we keep going forward with these new lessons, and thank you again for the action plan I requested. Hopefully going forward, like I say, it's a template. It should be easier. Take a little bit of workload off your staff because it will be there ready just to populate. So thank you very much. Any other further questions on this item? I'm being reminded. Could we have an updated action plan when the final item is completed? Are we happy to agree this item?
Agree.
Agreed.
Thank you. Then we'll go on to the final item of today's marathon. Item 11, Tennessee fraud update, and I believe it's yourself, Karen. Oh, Stephen, go on.
Rena, thank you. Following the February Audit Committee, members requested that an update be prepared outlining the current practice in terms of identifying, preventing and responding to tenancy fraud within Falkirk social housing stock. Point 4.3 in the report confirms that the case highlighted that committee was concluded in May 25 with the property being recovered, and the successful conclusion was very much a joint effort between the various teams working across the council to get the requisite outcome. Just to clarify for members, tenancy fraud occurs when a home is used in a way that breaks the tenancy agreement. So 4.5 confirms the definition and scope of tenancy fraud, the reasons why it can occur, and the impact of those fraudulent activities. Now, managing instances of fraud is, as much as Isabel mentioned earlier in her presentation, it's much about preventative actions taken as to responding to identified cases. The link between tenancy fraud are compounded by a lack often of understanding within the community and within the households concerned about their rights and responsibilities. And that is something that we have worked hard to address over the period since the last major legislative change in 2019. Members were made aware of the notional costs of fraudulent tenancy activity, and that was based on a 4-year assumed tenancy fraud period. And 7.3 indicates, based on current figures from ourselves, staffing costs, etc., about what the annual cost is likely to be if everything was taken into account. But just to stress that point, that this is a notional cost. So the report, as outlined, was really to provide the committee with the comfort that this third year of work, though sensitive for the individuals concerned and also for communities, is being progressed in a measured and coherent manner. Addressing tenancy fraud, or when it occurs, is vital and crucial for ensuring that housing properties are allocated to those in genuine need. And hopefully this report demonstrates that the Council has taken a proactive and integrated approach to safeguarding a scarce social asset. Our continued vigilance in the prevention, detection and enforcement ensure that we are better able to protect our housing stock. And it's fair to say, as was noted in the recommendations, that potential tenancy fraud cases are low, but given the housing crisis and the situation we face nationally, it remains an emerging threat. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. I apologise for this question. It may sound a bit processy, but you see that the number of potential tenancy fraud cases remain low. How do we know that? How do we identify tenancy fraud? And how will it be monitored going forward?
Apologies, Convener. Operational changes have been made within the area housing teams so that the housing office is now more proactively involved in the verification process. One of the items highlighted in section 4.5 talks about fraudulent information at a housing application stage. Well, they are now proactively verifying those applications prior to offer. So that's a fundamental part of what they do. A better interpersonal relationship with prospective customers enables us to better understand their needs and situation, and we identify issues at that particular stage. So that's an ongoing process and a recent development. When we're looking at cases such as assignment, assignation or successions, my deputy manager basically used the phrase spidey sense. You tend to get an understanding when something doesn't feel right. So that's when we do involve our colleagues in the fraud team. So we ask for checks if we can't verify the details ourselves from other sources and use them as a way of verifying the information that we had. So ongoing monitoring and supervision is very much about reviewing cases as they go through at the offer stage. That involves our colleagues in homes as well, because the same applies there. So fraudulent information given, we verify all those details before we make that offer. So it's about early identification and prevention. But like I said, what we do have is a misunderstanding in some instances, and that can be within the community about the rules and regulations to succeed to a tenancy, for example. So basically, one of our efforts is to ensure that the information given out at the commencement of tenancy, during the tenancy, or when unfortunately happens a bereavement or something like that, people are fully understanding of the rights, responsibilities, so they don't drift inadvertently into a fraudulent situation. So it's information, public awareness, public understanding with diligent background checking of applications just to make sure we are confident about what we're doing.
That's helpful. And one of my other questions was really about how you actually interact with corporate fraud. And it's just whether you see a bigger role for corporate fraud going forward to help and support the team in trying to minimise the potential tenancy fraud.
I think it's fair to say we have a good working relationship with the fraud section, and that is a developing situation. Again, similar, we are demand led. We don't always know from one day to the next what information or what is going to be required. Like I said, we have systems and processes in place, procedurally set out, which are monitored through our ISO accreditation and different things. So we have processes which are verified by our legal team, and they look to check what current case law is, what practices occurring nationally, so that we can adapt and adjust. Like I said, the work with fraud is very much about trying to send stress what we think is the situation. The other extra validation just gives us that extra assurance if we do have to go through the unfortunate situation of pursuing a legal case against somebody. It's about making sure that all our evidence is fully backed up and audited.
Kenny.
Yep, thanks, Convener. Just to tie up on what Steve said there, we're now more cohesive with all different teams, with our welfare benefits teams, support teams, with our colleagues in health and social care, tying up these things. We also do our annual visits now as well. It's all about knowing the tenant. We're not there to catch them out, we're there to support them. So we're using a more informed and support method now that helps the support. And as Steve said, all tenancies are classed as fraud, but some are not deliberate fraud. Sometimes where they think, oh, the house can go to them when their mother dies. It's not because there are lots of things like that. When it is required fraud, or where we do think, then obviously we will go to our colleagues to try and help with that. But as Steve says, we're doing a lot more on the ground to get all the information first before we start just going through and saying, oh, they're fraud. So there's a bit of tendency to make sure that we've got all the facts first before we go there. But again, it's more a supportive approach rather than straight in and saying, look, they're fraud there, Councillor.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. In terms of the numbers, I have to say that as councillor, the community appears to have the perception that there is more fraud than you are identifying as fraud. I wonder if you could say a bit more about how that comes about and how we tackle that as an issue.
Thank you, Councillor. Instances can occur within communities and information does come through because our approach of trying to be active and visible within the communities hopefully builds relationships where people will talk to us more regularly and give us information. One of the issues that does crop up in one of the instances more often than not is issues of people not necessarily living at the property. We have procedures and processes in place which helps us, which links back in with fraud to be look at the financial footprint about what's actually being said. So the perception is that possibly there is a bigger problem than there actually is. Like I said, no question, it's a potentially emerging threat given the fact that housing is a scarce resource. What we're looking at is we react to any instances of alleged abandonment or where we pick up through the visits, as Kenny quite rightly said, if we're picking up that maybe somebody's not using it as their principal home, then we will follow up and check those investigations. One example by way of illustration is that two individuals shared property. One was the tenant. They'd moved away to work in a different part of the country and left the person in situ. Really came to light through our work with the fraud team that they'd taken on a lease for another property elsewhere. That can't be construed as a principal home, so that resulted in action being taken. So it's about trying to build that level of understanding and knowledge about what individual circumstances are, separating mischievous information being given to us, focusing on the factual evidence that can actually do progress, I guess.
Thank you.
Councillor Forrest.
Thanks. Just leads on from something Kenny said there. Kenny, you said the annual visits per year. Can you give me a rough idea of the percentage of tenants who actually receive an annual visit?
No, but yeah, apologies. We're happy to furnish that, and when we say we try and get them annual there, and it's very much led. And when we say an annual visit, we'll take every opportunity. If we're going to visit about something else, we'll tie that visit in as well. But I know Steve and that are collecting the teams, and I'm happy for them to get these information for committee. Apologies for that.
It's not a problem. I honestly didn't expect it to be that great anyway, but thank you. Sorry, that sounded I didn't mean it that way.
Okay, is there any other questions? No? Are we happy to agree this item?
Agreed.
Then I'd like to thank everybody for your attendance and effort in your presentations, and I'll call a close to the meeting. Thank you.